The morning sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when the roar of diesel engines ripped me out of sleep. It was 6:30 a.m. on a crisp October day in 2024, and I stumbled to the window of my family's farmhouse in Willow Creek, Montana, wearing nothing but a worn-out t-shirt and boxers. What I saw outside made my heart sink like a stone in a frozen river. A bulldozer was tearing through the cedar fence my great-grandfather had built with his own hands back in 1882. That fence wasn't just wood and wire, it was our family's legacy. Each post carved from trees felled on this land. Each section a testament to the grit and pride of the Larson family. For over a century, we'd maintained it, patching storm damage and replacing weathered boards with the kind of care you don't find in today's world. But there it was, splintering under the blade of a machine driven by a guy who looked like he was just punching a clock. I didn't bother with shoes. Rage carried me outside, the gravel biting into my bare feet as I sprinted toward the destruction. "Stop! Get off my land!" I shouted, my voice raw with a fury I didn't know I had. The operator glanced at me through his tinted cab window, shrugged, and pointed to a woman standing by a sleek black SUV. She was maybe mid-40s, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed money, holding a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. Her name was Evelyn Carter, and I'd never seen her before in my life. When I stormed over, she didn't flinch, just gave me a smile that felt like a blade. "Mr. Larson," she said, her voice sharp as a winter wind. "This is a legally approved easement. We're building a road through your property, and it's going to boost your land's value. You should be thanking me." Thanking her? For tearing down a fence that had stood longer than her entire family tree? I was too stunned to laugh. She waved a stack of papers in my face, talking like I was some backwoods fool who couldn't read. "Everything's in order, filed with the county, approved by the proper authorities. You have no legal ground to stop us." My blood was boiling, but I wasn't about to let her see me crack. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I tried to explain that strangers were destroying my property. While I waited, I grabbed whatever scrap wood and wire I could find and started throwing together a makeshift barrier across their fresh asphalt, hammering up signs that screamed private property and no trespassing. It was a desperate move, but I had to do something. The police showed up, but instead of hauling Evelyn and her crew off my land, they asked me to prove I owned it. This ranch had been in my family since Montana was barely a state, and now I was the one who had to justify my place here. Evelyn handed over her easement papers with a smug grin, and the officers studied them like they were sacred texts. "Looks legit," one cop said, handing them back to her. I tried to tell him about the history of this place, how my ancestors had carved this ranch out of nothing but wilderness and willpower, but his eyes told me he'd already made up his mind. That evening, as I stood in the wreckage of my fence line, a delivery truck rolled up. The driver handed me an envelope that felt heavier than it should. Inside was a lawsuit from the local HOA, demanding $30,000 for obstructing a public easement, plus $600 a day in fines for my continued interference with essential community infrastructure. They were suing me for trying to protect my own land. I read the papers 3 times, each word tightening the knot in my chest. The money they wanted was more than the ranch made in a good year. With legal fees, it could bankrupt me, force me to sell the very land I was fighting for. The irony wasn't lost on me. Defending my family's legacy might cost me everything they'd built. Finding a lawyer who'd take on an HOA was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Most attorneys I called dealt with divorces or car accidents, and the few who handled property disputes got quiet when I mentioned the HOA. Then a friend pointed me to Thomas Reed, a grizzled 55-year-old attorney who'd tangled with HOAs before. His office was a mess law books stacked to the ceiling, a coffee pot that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 90s, and a desk buried under case files. But when I told him my story, I saw a spark in his eyes. "This isn't just about your land, Ethan," he said, leaning back in his creaky chair. "This is about stopping these vultures before they gobble up every family ranch from here to Bozeman." Thomas pored over Evelyn's easement papers and spotted something off within minutes. The notary seal looked too crisp, too modern for a document supposedly signed in 1987. "And why," he muttered, "would your great-grandfather sign away land rights a year before he died?" Buried in the fine print was a clause Evelyn hadn't mentioned, The easement could be revoked with 30 days written notice. If that document was real, my great-grandfather could have canceled it with a single letter. But something told us he never signed it at all. Evelyn didn't let up. Every morning brought a new violation notice, each one slapping me with another $600 fine. Neighbors I'd known my whole life started avoiding me, some out of fear, others because they bought Evelyn's line that I was blocking community progress. The pressure was suffocating, legal bills piling up, my savings draining, and the constant humiliation of watching strangers drive through my land like it was a public park. I kept security cameras rolling, capturing every bulldozer and smug glance, but it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Then we found the crack in their armor. Thomas hired a handwriting expert, Dr. Emily Chion, who confirmed the signature on the easement was a forgery traced from another document with surgical precision. He also dug into county records and found a pattern. The HOA had used similar posthumous easements to steal land from 4 other families in the past 6 years. All were elderly. All had valuable land near new luxury developments. One of them, Maria Gonzalez, a 70-year-old widow, told us a story that made my blood run cold. She'd lost her family's orchard to a community access road, thinking she was signing papers to help the neighborhood. Now her grandchildren had nowhere to play, and the HOA had fined her for trying to replant. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. County Commissioner Daniel Pierce had rubber-stamped every shady easement without the required public hearings. His brother-in-law worked as a consultant for Pinnacle Properties, the developer behind the luxury subdivision that needed my land for a highway connection. Without that road, their 15 parcels bought dirt cheap under suspicious circumstances were worthless for their planned 250-home development. With it, they stood to make $60 million. Suddenly, Evelyn's obsession with my ranch made sense. I spent a sleepless night in the attic, sifting through dusty boxes of my great-grandmother's recipes and old tax records, hoping for a miracle. And I found it, my great-grandfather's 1986 will, written in his unmistakable scrawl. It stated that no easement could be granted without the unanimous consent of all living heirs, renewed every decade. The will had never been probated, making it legally binding. It was a bombshell. If we could prove it in court, Evelyn's entire case would collapse. But the fight was far from over. Evelyn escalated her campaign, spreading lies at community meetings that painted me as a selfish loner blocking emergency services. The local paper ran an editorial calling me a stubborn rancher holding back progress. Neighbors I'd known for decades stopped making eye contact. Then came the break-in at Thomas's office. Nothing stolen, just our HOA files scattered like a warning. A security guard showed up with Evelyn one evening, his hand resting on something under his jacket as she threatened trespassing charges if I didn't back off. One night, I saw a shadow by my barn, a figure watching from the edge of the property. This wasn't just about land, Anna Maria, it was about survival. Thomas suggested a bold move, countersue for fraud. It was risky, but we had no choice. A whistleblower from the county clerk's office, too scared to give their name, met us at an abandoned diner at 2 a.m., handing over a folder of damning evidence. Transcripts showed Pierce fast-tracking Pinnacle's applications, bypassing environmental reviews and state laws. The corruption ran deep, with ties to the sheriff's office and even the local news. The courtroom was a battlefield. Pinnacle hired a high-powered Seattle firm, Grayson and Partners, who rolled in with fake traffic studies and actors posing as concerned citizens worried about ambulance delays. Their lead attorney, Victor Grayson, painted me as a dangerous recluse endangering lives. The judge, Margaret Collins, seemed to buy it at first, lecturing me about public safety over personal interests. I felt the ground slipping beneath me. Then Thomas unleashed our evidence. He presented county maps proving 2 faster access routes already existed, debunking the HOA's claims. Fire Chief Michael Torres testified that his department never needed my land for access. The real kicker came when Thomas revealed Evelyn's financial ties. $320,000 in consulting fees from Pinnacle, plus a 10% stake in their developments. Her confident facade crumbled as bank records hit the table. When Maria Gonzalez testified about a suspicious notary seal change, the courtroom gasped. Federal agents stormed in mid-hearing, arresting Evelyn for fraud, conspiracy, and running a criminal enterprise that had stolen $2.5 million in land across 3 counties. Evelyn tried to pin it on Pierce and rogue HOA members, but her lies unraveled. She pleaded guilty, facing 5 years in prison and $700,000 in restitution. Pierce got 3 years and a lifetime ban from public office. The HOA was dismantled, its fraudulent easements voided. Maria got her orchard back, and I watched contractors rebuild my fence, replanting cedar posts exactly as my great-grandfather had. Pinnacle went bankrupt, their subdivision plan scrapped. I used my $85,000 settlement to start a legal fund for families facing similar scams, and I bought Evelyn's foreclosed mansion at auction, donating it to a veterans charity. Standing on my restored ranch at dusk, I felt my great-grandfather's presence in the Montana wind. This land had survived blizzards, depressions, and now a criminal conspiracy. It wasn't just dirt, it was our blood, our fight. Maria's first harvest party, with kids running through her orchard, reminded me why we fought. No family should face this alone. But here's where it gets messy. Would you keep fighting if it meant risking everything: your home, your savings, your sanity? Would you take a settlement and walk away, knowing it meant abandoning your roots? Or would you stand your ground, even if it made you a target? And what about justice? Does it mean winning in court, or making sure no one else suffers the same fate? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if this hit home, and subscribe for more stories that'll keep you up at night. What would you do?